us as our counselor, our guide, our teacher, our pastor, our shepherd. You would guide and direct and help us understand as we look into, again, the projected prophetic timeline, the things that will happen and which will then unlock the next step ahead of the tribulation period, which will then lead to your 1,000-year reign, which will then lead to another 1,000-year reign of God the Father on the earth, as you will reign prior to that as God the Son. We ask you to continue to guide, direct, help us understand, and enlighten our mind and heart and spirit to your truth, to your word, not just to understanding of what's out ahead and what's coming, but to then have that excitement and that joy and the sense of zeal for that, cause us to think differently, live differently, seek you more, want to be better at being better children and servants for you. And just forgive us, Father, where we know we've not measured up, but we know that you love and forgive and look beyond all that. Pick us up, wash us clean, and make every day fresh and new. We thank you for that. We ask that you just keep us in that sense of your love and your forgiveness as we balance that with the challenge of being disciplined and obedient to you. When we fall short, help us to know that you pick us up. Know that we will fall and experience those falls, but you pick us up as a righteous person. May fall 6 times and get up 7. So we thank you for being our restoring and loving and caring, compassionate Heavenly Father. But we also know that you expect from us this obedience and understanding of dedication of our lives to you. So we ask that you keep that balance in our hearts, the love you have, but yet the requirement you want us to live in accordance with how you've given us and charged us of how you want us to show love through obedience. So Father, we ask now for your enlightenment to these things out ahead. Guide us, direct us, and teach us. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, amen. All right, so lengthy prayer, sorry. That's how I am sometimes. So we're going to be going through the prophetic timeline. You don't have a chart of this. I'm sure you don't. But now you have this here. I'll give you this one. I have another one back in the back. I actually give both of you. Hold on a second. I'm going to just appear for a second to the back curtain.
Who's that?
Man, behind the curtain. I feel like I'm Wizard of Oz now. I'm the wizard behind the curtain. Here you go. Actually, it's supposed to represent like an idea of the Holy of Holies. You know, yeah. So I like that whole curtain idea instead of a door being there. All right, so the prophetic timeline is something I put together that was just, again, to remind people what I am not doing. What I am not doing is setting dates. Not doing that. Okay? What I'm not doing is definitively saying this is the end of all. I'm not doing that either. What I am doing is nothing more than a projection. It's almost like saying, if in fact we are to assume that this is true, then therefore we can project and extrapolate out that this may be true. That's all I'm saying. Okay? So with that being said, now you may say, well, then if you're extrapolating from saying this is true, you're saying your basis of biblical understanding is not true? No. I'm saying when it comes to dates, it's subjected to not being true. Bible's true 100%, but the dates, there's some wackadoodle stuff going on. And I can prove it to you today in the Bible where there's 2 conflicting dates, one from the Septuagint and one from the King James. I'll prove it to you. And you're going, what? What does that prove? It proves that people, all you got to do is Google yourself and look up the Exodus from Egypt. And you will find all kinds of people going, well, it's in the 1300s, no, 1200s, no, 1400s. Well, will the real truth please stand up? Why are you so convoluted on this? And the reason they are is because of the dates of the lineage back when we studied long ago, Genesis in chapter 9. There's a lot, or chapter 9 through 11, there's a lot of differences and the dates and ages of people. There's a whole generation skipped in the King James that's in the Septuagint. What? Yeah, like a lot of years just gone. What is that all about? And then you read the book of Matthew and the genealogy, it's missing there too. If you remember that study we did a long time ago, but it's missing. And I'll tell you what, I'll show it to you. For those who weren't here for that, let me show it to you. So first I'm going to go to, I'll show you just, all I'm doing now is showing you why. I'm not showing you why not to trust the Bible, by no means. I'm saying how you should trust the Scripture, but know because of dates that God purposely left out. He wants you to know that's why no man can know the day or the hour. That's why no one can sit here and say definitively this is when it's going to be. Because there's too many open-ended, hidden things that God did on purpose to veil himself from you and me so we don't get caught up in this date-setting thing. The same reason why he hid Moses' body. Does that mean Moses didn't die? Really? He died. Okay? God just hid his body when no one knows where he's buried. Because he knows, if they knew, it says they'd worship him. Yeah.
Just like if we knew the exact day, we'd go,
oh, all I'm doing is worry about that day. No, he wants you to worry about every day and every moment and every situation. That's why he doesn't want you to know. Not because he doesn't know, but because he doesn't want you and me to know, to be idiots like that, and focus on nothing else matters except for that one day. As long as I can screw up royally, but on that day I get it right, ha ha ha.
Well,
that's ignorant. Are you serious right now? But people will do that. Or they'll bank on that one day to, sell everything off, and then it doesn't come to pass. And it's like Harold Camping did, no offense to him. He's dead now, but oh my goodness. So if you go to Genesis in chapter 9, you will see, if I can turn, my Bible here is kind of like all jacked up, as you can see probably online. Okay, so
Todd has a comment.
chapter 11 actually. Yes.
Todd said, when did you email the prophetic timeline?
I emailed that the same day as our last lesson, which is last Sunday, which would be the 22nd. October 22nd, the morning of our study, I emailed it to you on Sunday morning. So that time right before at 10 o'clock in the morning roughly?
Is that okay?
No problem. So if you look at this scripture here, look in Genesis chapter 11 and verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. And Shem was a son of 100 years old and begat Arphaxad. 2 years after the flood, and Shem lived and begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters, and Arphaxad lived 500 years. Or excuse me, lived 530 years and begat Selah. Can you see that? Now, what I'm going to read to you, I'm going to go to the Septuagint now, and read to you also in Genesis chapter 11. Okay. So as you continue to read here, let me show you. Okay. So in Genesis in chapter 11, verse 10, 11, it says Arphaxad in verse 11. It says 5 and verse 12. 5 and 30 years, which is 35 years. Says the same thing, right? But now, so that matches up. So now go over to the book of Matthew.
Check your mic.
Oh. Sorry.
Ken said never mind. So
There you go. So go to the book of Matthew.
she said it was just where you were standing.
No, it's my mic. It failed. The microphone did kind of go like that, so it lost its grip. So go to chapter 1 of the book of Matthew. And if you see in chapter 1 from the book of Matthew, not just but Matthew, excuse me. Nope, not Matthew. My apology. Luke. I'm sorry. Those are the two with the genealogy in it, and I forgot. I chose the wrong one. So go to Luke. It's in chapter 2. Let me see here. I got to find the... Where's the... Hold on a minute here. I didn't have this earmarked, and that's my fault. This is actually a spontaneous thing I just brought up to you. I wanted to show you. Here it is. Chapter 3, is it? I was off by twice. Thank you, Sister Nancy. Thank you. There it is, chapter 3. Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right. So if you look at these people here, so if you look at these people and you look at the people here, you have, see where it says in chapter 3 of Luke in verse 30, see the right, let me see, 36, thank you, where it says the son of Canaan, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, Lamech, right? Then it says Selah. So look over.
Well, there's a person between Arphaxad and Shelah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Selah, and look on your, so you'll go back to, let me see here, where is it at? Eber. I'm trying to remember where this is at here, if I can find it here for you. So if you look at that scripture there in chapter 9 of Genesis, where he says, and Shem, in verse 10, begat Arphaxad, and Shem lived and begat Arphaxad 500 years, and Arphaxad begat Selah, and Selah begat Eber, and Eber begat Peleg. So over in the scripture there, and as you see that in Luke chapter 3, it's Arphaxad, and then you have how do you say this backwards? It says Shem, Arphaxad, then Canaan is there. You see how Canaan is not mentioned over in Genesis? You see that? You see between Selah and Arphaxad is the son of Canaan. Do you see that in Luke chapter 3, verse 36? So if you're going backwards, it's Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Canaan, Selah. But over here, it's different. It doesn't say Shem, Arphaxad. It says Shem in Genesis chapter 9, then Arphaxad, and then Selah. There's no Canaan. Canaan's not mentioned at all in Genesis. You see that? But in Luke he is. In Luke he says, in verse 36, you're going backwards, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Canaan, the son of Selah. So in between Selah and Arphaxad is a person, is a generation not mentioned in Genesis.
God said Genesis 11.
Genesis 11. There's no Canaan mentioned in Genesis 11. That's what I'm pointing out to you. He's not mentioned, at all. So with that generation being where's that at? Why is that not there? And you see that's a little bit confusing. But over in the Septuagint, he is mentioned. Look in the Septuagint in verse 13. And in verse, well, you don't have a Septuagint, I'll read it to you. In verse 12 it says, Arphaxad lived and he begat Canaan 400 years and begat sons and daughters. And Canaan lived 135 years and begat Selah. Say, what? So why is Canaan in the Septuagint, but he's not over here in the King James? What's up? Why is that? Which one would you trust? A book that was, no offense, I'm just saying, trust the Bible no matter what. But the manuscript that this is in the 16th century, or 17th century, 1600s, this is from, hello, that's a little note I'm reading. This was from before Christ, BC. So you got 1,600 years earlier manuscripts from Hebrew translated to Greek, translated to English, and this 1,600 years later from English to King James. Which one would you trust for accuracy? The manuscript, the older one, right? Well, you can't word study from it though, because it's in Greek to English. Sorry, but this is taking original Hebrew to English to King James, but it's unfortunately from manuscripts only from post AD 70 Titus after he destroyed. They had what was left over, so sorry, we don't have the originals. That's why Canaan's in here, but not in here. So people may get mistaken about the years. They get mistaken, but to prove it, people say you can't trust Septuagint. It's hogwash. It's Greek. They ruined the Jewish Bible. Then why would Jesus have it mentioned then by the Gospel of Luke? Why would it be there? Why would God go, I'm going to put a mistake in the Bible? Why would he do that? It makes no sense. He's proving to you this is more accurate. Proof, context-wise, is more accurate. So that's one subjection as to how you can't know the timeline correctly, because the events aren't recorded correctly from the manuscripts. So they missed some things on the manuscripts, whereas this one they got it all. I'm not saying you can't trust the King James. You can. You just can't trust the dates because they're off. Let me show you another example, by the way, where it's off. Go to the book of, so far you saw that? The Canaan's not there. Now go to the book of 1 Kings chapter 6. Another fascinating thing that's off. So anybody who wants to say to you, I'm proving this now for anybody who's online watching for the first time and you're going, this guy's wackadoodle, just go to PFBCstudies.com and you'll receive some more things. But I'm just putting forth references to how no man, including me, or woman for that matter, mankind, cannot sit here and say, oh, by the way, here's the date and time, Jesus is coming. So the point is, the emphasis of my preface here is to say, don't trust in your mindset and your logic, but have more emphasis on trusting in the Bible. But when you trust in the Bible, understand that the manuscripts you read are sometimes not as accurate as they need to be. Doesn't mean the Bible can't be trusted. It just means that people who translated them or who used more recent manuscripts and not the older ones aren't able to give you the more accurate understanding. That's why we use the Septuagint. That's why we use the Diglot, because they have the more accurate manuscripts. For the New Testament is the Diglot, and for the Old Testament is the Septuagint. So for those who say, oh, I can't trust the Bible, yeah, you can. You just can't trust the English rendering that you're reading to be completely accurate. That's all I'm saying. It's going to be accurate to a general sense, but you want to be more specific, studious, then you got to go to those references. So you can still trust it. You just can't trust the accuracy of the details of the dates sometimes because of that misnomer. That's okay. So right now, if you go to 1 Kings chapter 6, go to 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. 1 Kings 6, verse 1. And it came to pass, in the 480th year after the sons of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign of Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the 2nd month, he began to build the house of the Lord. This is why on the chart of what time is it, I put Solomon builds the temple in 907 BC. But the average person in Christianity goes, he's wrong. He built it in like 950 something. Why am I off by 40
Plus years. What's up with that? How am I off?
My mom must be good. Well, wait a minute. Let me show you why. Go to the Septuagint in 1 Kings. Glad you asked that question. So go to the 1 Kings, the Septuagint. By the way, if you'll notice in the Septuagint, it's a little wackadoodle. I have some writing in mind. But yes, 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1 starts with verse 2. You're like, huh? That's because, remember, we put verses and chapters in the Bible. It was written in a scroll. So if the verse is off, like I care. As long as the content is in there, that's all I care about. So content, I can take the Septuagint for 100% accuracy for content and for scale. For the word studies, I have to go to the King James because this is a translation from Hebrew to Greek to English.
So I can't do a word study. I don't know the original Hebrew word. I don't have it. I have to go to that. But when I go to that, I miss some of the context. So it's like, So God makes you forced to use both. You have to use both. Does that make sense?
You with me? Okay? Make sense? Okay? All right. So 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, if you look up in your Septuagint to the verses above it, right before verse 17 is the interjected verse 1.
Which is kind of odd. So in between verse 16 and 17,
17 of the Septuagint is where verse 1 is of chapter 6. You're like, what? That's the context, man. So the context of how the scroll read actually, they were actually putting in now in the 440th year of the departure of the Israelites out of Egypt. In the 4th year, say, whoa. The King James says 480th year. Why did the Septuagint say 440? I don't understand. Which one can I trust? This is better context, remember? So why do you say 480 over there? The Bible's wrong. You just prove not to trust God's word. No. What I'm showing you is that the scribe came across that 440, and because of their misnomer of when the Exodus happened, they go, I got to add in the 40 years of wandering. So they added the 40 years of wandering in and said 480. No, dude, you got to keep it to what it says. It said 440. Stop adding 40 years because you want to assume that somebody left out the wandering of the wilderness issues, the 40 years of that, because they're counting when they came into the land, right? But this says 440 years before, from the temple to that Exodus. But over there, so again, here he's saying there was 440 years of the departure of the Israelites out of Egypt. There's 440 years. They added 40 years in the King James to account for the 40 years of wandering. Hence why, if you look up online, when did Solomon's reign or Solomon's temple get built? They'll say around 950-ish. Whereas on my chart, I say 907. It's a 43-year difference, and that's why.
That's one of the reasons why. Other reasons why they don't interpolate different issues of when
The actual Babylonian destruction happened, because they backload into that. They're off by 40 years over here, but they're off by 3 years on the destruction of the temple, which is why I get to the 907, if you're wondering. So that's the reason why you say, well, you just counted for 40 years. What's the other?
3 years because of the destruction. They round off and say it was like 583 or something. It's actually 586.
6 that it was destroyed. So that's what that is. So because there was 3 to their defense, there was 3 sieges of Jerusalem, but they don't interpolate that correctly from some 609, 605. They get it all messed up. So they just round it off and they get some rounded off dates. So those are the reasons. I just given you 2 scriptural manifested truths between the Septuagint and the actual King James Version, which every version is based off of, that all of a sudden now you have 2 different demarcations of years that are clearly different. 480 in the King James, 1 Kings 6:1, 440 in the Septuagint, 1 Kings 6:1. Then you have Arphaxad and Canaan, not mentioned in the King James, but you do
have Canaan mentioned in between Arphaxad and Selah and the Septuagint. What gives?
So that's why you have to use both. Yes.
Tracy said maybe you should move the mic up because it keeps going low so they can't hear. And Todd and Sandy Gray agreed. And Vicky said, I think he's moving around too much.
I think it's I'll use the antenna out of my pocket. That'll be better right there, I believe. That should help you a lot right there.
And Todd said, I think it's just a connection issue.
Yep, might be. All right, so we'll say this right here. I just did it better for myself. I mean, I'll try this one out too. I've never had this problem before, but I think my shirt was covering up the antenna. All right, so far everything makes sense? You with me? So I'm not saying don't trust the Bible. I'm saying you can't trust English rendering. If you're going to be a student, then God says you got to require yourself. It's like anything else I mentioned to you guys in private time. I said, look, and a reference to the Bible, there's the word, as we all know, from the book of Acts. We're talking about the study we did in the book of Acts, where it said akribos. And remember, Apollos, it said, knew the Bible akribos, which means kribos, and akribos, meaning he knew it accurately, precisely accurately. But yet Priscilla and Aquila taught him more accurately. Huh? So the King James is accurate, but the Septuagint is more accurate, precise on dates. So think of it that way. So if you think of it that way, you're going, oh, it makes sense from how Apollos could be right, but he wasn't completely right because he was missing some stuff. So what he was saying was wrong? No. He didn't have the whole gamut of understanding that Priscilla and Aquila did. Just like if you read the King James, it's not wrong. It's that you don't have the full understanding of what he's talking about. So why would God veil it? Easy, if you ask me, because God always does that. He veils things all the time from people. So Sister Nancy's point you had before, you had questions about the tribulation aspect of things. What was the three questions you had again? The last, we cut off at the end. What was the three questions?
Well, about the Valley of Jehoshaphat people, that was not.
I want to make sure so what was you're asking about, what was the question about that? I want to make sure I don't.
Oh, well, that they ceased to exist.
Right. So people in Jehoshaphat cease to exist. That's the 75-day period of folks, and they don't live it. Those are people that are not in Testament and not of covenant. That's what that's talking about. So as we get this back and forth, I want to make sure we're back on this issue of the timeline. So I erased this part of the board, just so you know. It's not the same thing as you got from the picture on last Sunday. I erased this part, just so you know, on purpose. So I don't want you to think, oh, it's the same thing. No, it's not. This part's different. All right, so what I did now is all I did was go through. I want to show you some interesting numbers that I find to be just interesting and fascinating. So I'm just saying how God's like going, ha ha. So I think it's just kind of, interesting. First of all, by the way, did you know the Dome of the Rock is an octagon shape? Did you know that? It's an octagon shape. An octagon, when I went to math class, that's 8 sides, right? Okay, that's what I thought. So, by the way, the Muslim people believe that Adam, Cain, Abel, wait for it. Wow, this is pretty crazy. Noah, Abram, Ishmael, Isaac, then Ishmael, and then Muhammad all have a relationship to this rock, because the first 3 sacrificed there, and Muhammad, they say, ascended from there. Really? So that's what they claim. But of course, Ishmael was the one, they want to say, that Abraham took up to there to be sacrificed, not Isaac, by the way. You're like, really? Whatever. So the whole reality is that I wanted to point out just some dates. I'm not some dates, you look up yourself. The Dome of the Rock was constructed in 691 AD, but it's actually February. I left my specific notes at home last time. I forgot where they were on my desk. But now I brought them this time, so I have them here now. So, all right. So a little date. So it was 691 in February, and then it was restored. The first time it was restored was in 1023 AD, which is a 332-year difference. But if you adjust it for the 5.25 days, you got actually it's 328-year difference. That year actually comes back. So that means it's 328 years. You with me?
Is that related to the 2023 you're thinking of?
I'm going to show you in a minute where that relates in. So you're asking about, it's going to be down here. I'll show you. I'm going to tie this in together into I'm going to show you some interesting numbers. I don't think it's coincidental. I think it's just interesting to me. Like, I don't know what it means exactly, but I know it means something, because these numbers don't match up just by happen chance. I just think it's interesting to me. So this right here is 328 years between when the temple was first, or the Dome of the Rock was first built, to when it was first restored. Its first restoration was in 1023 after a destruction in between there. So it was 328. Then you have the temple built in 907, which is in November it was built, based on 1 Kings 6 statements. The month doesn't change, just the year changes, and the King James to the Septuagint. It was restored in 515 BC by Zerubbabel, and that was in May. So that's 391 years, because you got to count November as the end of the year, actually, so I don't really count the full year there. So then you got minus 328, so it took 391 years to restore a temple from when it was built. The time frame between building and restoring is 391. The dome had 328 years between. You minus those 2 years apart, there's a 63-year difference. I find it interesting because of that issue of what's going to happen next. Watch this. So there's 63 years difference. Well, watch this. The dome was the last restoration of the Dome of the Rock was 1962. So in 62 was last restored. But if you adjust that year for the 5.25 extra days we've added, it's actually 1933 it was actually last restored. So is it going to be destroyed in 97 years from now, from this year? Why do I say 97 years? Because the temple was last restored in 165 BC in Hanukkah. And then, AD 70, it was destroyed. So it was from the last restoration of the temple to the destruction that we saw by Titus, there was 96 years. But when you adjust it for the 5.25 days, it's actually a 97 year. So wait a minute, that's interesting. So, because it's the difference between BC and AD. Remember, you got to add that up. So when you get that, you add 97 to this, it's 2023, excuse me, no, it's 2030, wait, look at my math. I think it's 2030, I believe, right? I did the math wrong. Is that right? 2030, correct? That's 2030, right? Let me see. Gosh darn it. Come on. Stop. Yes, I wrote the wrong thing on the board. 1933 plus 97. My math is 2030. Yeah, sorry. 2030. Sorry, that's what I meant to write here. But tribulation has to start in 2023. If you look on the chart, that's why I put on the chart, that's why I put here the midpoint, mid-September, excuse me, Tishri 2023 is the start date. That's the day tribulation has to start. So what's this? What I'm saying is this. The 97 years between here, if you add that to 1933, which is the adjusted year of the last restoration of the dome, to parlay it into, okay, if you compare the first building to the restoration of the dome to the first building restoration of the temple, there's a difference in how long it took between each of those time periods of a 63-year difference. And interesting, it took the temple 63 years longer before it was restored. What was interesting is here on this, you have 97-year difference here, but there's 7 years difference if you look at 2030 versus 2023, there's 7-year difference. There's a 7-year difference. Now, here's where it's weird to me. There's a 7-year difference between this and this, but you add 7 to 63, and that's, last time I checked, that's 70. And that kind of speaks to Daniel's 70th week as far as I'm concerned. And I'm like, that's kind of freaky. So I'm just saying. So, and what a coincidence that it's 7 years beyond the timeline of when God said, but there's a 7-year difference in there. Yeah, it's interesting to me. I don't know what it means exactly, other than I think the numbers are just odd to me how they match up like that. Yes?
Now, that last line there, I think you're saying the biblical year 360 versus the solar year 365.
Correct.
My understanding is the solar year started around 700 BC because you had Joshua and the day the earth stood still. That affected it some. And then what really affected it was Hezekiah and the sundial. That's
Okay.
when we went
Well,
to the solar year.
it affected, well, the official, just so you know, like on here, like when you're talking about the solar year when it was effective, on the what time is it chart, I went back to when the Romans first did that, it was the Julian calendar, and it's on the bottom here on this page, on the what time is it chart. In 45 BC is when we technically officially use the 365.25 calendar. Now, if you want to go back to the event, that's one thing, but when did we enforce a 365.25 general calendar? That was in 45 BC. So to your point, though, people usually use the 5, if they know about the 5.25, they go back from 0 BC and then do the math forward. No, you got 45 more years you got to account for in there. Actually 46, because 0 was a year. So you got 46 years there. You got to also add to your math. Does that make sense?
Well, you know, what gets me is if it is 23, I mean, I can't date set, but Fukushima will be raging 12 and a half years by that time, that horrible radioactive.
That's right,
explosion.
and Japan, yeah.
And then we've got the Islamic problem.
Huh?
I hear people saying that either Trump can't or won't, and we're still having a lot of Islamic immigration.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the situation in Europe, Germany, Sweden, it's most likely going to come
Yeah.
very soon.
Yeah, so
I hate to think 6
no.
years from now what it would be.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So I just think it's interesting, and you think about the timeline and where we are. As of next year, if you adjust the timeline, and on this is what this is all about, just in timeline. You have this, by the way, in that book? I give you that book? Yeah, so basically, if you adjust the timeline, we're in the year 1988 as of January. So if the Lord's going to come in 2,000 years, and therefore that's 1988, and you got to count 7 years for tribulation, that means he's going to come in 1993, as far as the tribulation is going to start, 93. He'll come in 2,000 years, but the tribulation has to start in 93, no later than. So you're like, uh-oh. Well, that's where I get this from. That's where I get this 2023 from. I just simply take 5 years from 2018, add 5 years to it, doing my math, that's 2023. Because that gives you to 1993. which is the same interpolated year from now, which is 2018 plus 5 is 2023. Does that make sense? I'm just taking our current year. We call it, yeah, I'm just saying. So the 2023 is the timeline from which everything should happen between now and then, which is why on the other chart, which is why down here I put 2021, only because I'm just saying, well, the Dome of the Rock, well, it happened before then. I was projecting before that it could happen before then, but it's no later than 2023 is all I'm saying. So, but based on what we know, but I already proved to you that I can't trust what I see in numbers, how man tells me what year it is. Like I can trust a guy to tell me, we're really in it. Yeah, right. Like I'm at Yahoo. Yeah, I can't even trust you to take the Bible and do it right. I mean, come on. You're not even referencing the Septuagint, but I'm gonna trust you with the calendar. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I just shudder to think what the shape the world's going to be in from Fukushima and this long by then. I shudder to think.
No, it's going to be, there's a lot, and right now they're talking about, Korea, of course, doing its weapon of mass destruction to hit the San Andreas Fault, the Yosemite, all that stuff, and then you have a pyroclasmic cloud, and that destroys, and there's a lot of stuff that could happen. By the way, just to reference, for those who are thinking, oh, he's talking about America and world events, and oh, I like this guy. No, I'm not. So I could care less about world events when it comes to what leads to tribulation. Has nothing to do with that. Has to do with one thing and one thing only, Dome of the Rock, which, by the way, the Dome of the Rock, by the way, if you know this or not, the Muslim authorities are accusing Israel of putting acidic chemicals in the foundation of the Dome of the Rock to have it itself implode and collapse on itself for the purpose of facilitating their rebuild of their temple. Because they know they can't rebuild the temple till the Dome of the Rock is gone. So the Muslim authorities and the King of Jordan have already accused Israel of putting acidic chemicals because there's some foundational cracks at the bottom of the dome, and they're going, and right now one of the comments from the Muslim rulers is, right now it's suspended in air, is the comment they made. Suspended in air. Well, they're saying it's gonna fall. Any kind of an earthquake over there doesn't need to be a large one. If it's just a slight one on a slight scale, Richter scale, it's gonna go down. That's what they're talking about. Well, they're saying Israel is doing the chemicals and they're infusing it into the concrete at the bottom to make the temple collapse, make the Dome of the Rock collapse, so that they can actually ready their temple to be rebuilt, which they can rebuild in 9 months. So they're just saying, hey, look, we're aware of this as Muslims, that they're accusing Israel. Just like, remember they accused Israel of knocking off some nuclear scientists in Iran. They couldn't prove it. I probably believe that's probably true. I'm sure they were doing that because they know they get a nuclear weapon, they're going to come right at them. They hate them. So it makes sense to me that they would take them out privately and say, oh, I didn't do that. Yeah, sure you didn't. But you have everything to gain by having that not be a valid nuclear country, obviously. So with all that being said, what it does is points to the end times of things, and it points to what's going on that people don't talk about a lot. But could it be that the UN's involved in the future state of affairs, where I mentioned before, the Dome of the Rock is going to be destroyed by an earthquake, I believe, or a misguided missile of their own Muslim Brotherhood to try to kill, because it's happened before, but all you got to do is look up fights between Israel and the Islam people and Muslim folks, and you will see that a lot of they can't guide their missiles too well, by the way. They're like Stone Age on their technology. So they just shoot and go. And so they're not as precise as the US is with how we do weaponry. So that's why you have very regular, you just look it up yourself on the Middle Eastern newspapers, and Muslim or Jewish alike. They'll say, oh, missile almost hit Dome of the Rock, or which was a Muslim missile aimed at killing Jewish people, and they almost hit their own holy site. So obviously it wasn't intentional. So that just shows you how ignorant they are. They can get close and not like, oh crap. They can get real close and almost knock out some of their own valuable, what they call high holy places. So all that just speaks to is that it's going to happen by accident, or by an earthquake, or maybe by a third-party source. Because if it happens between the Jews and Muslims alike, fighting in a war, that's a whole war. They're not going to do that. It's going to be, but that's why I don't think this whole Israel doing chemical thing, I don't think that's really real. God may use that, if it is real, to make it weakened for an earthquake to finish the job, but I don't think it's going to be a one-on-one relationship of Muslims fighting Jews, Jews fighting Muslims, and then the Dome of the Rock collapses. If that happens, you got World War III on your hands, and there's not going to be, after that, a path to peace. That makes no sense, which is what's going to happen. There's going to be the Dome of the Rock is going to be destroyed, and there has to be a path to peace to build the temple on the same ground that Muslims and Jews both count as holy. You can't have a war and expect to have a temple rebuilt. That makes no sense. You have to work together to do it, which, by the way, in Saladin's time frame, which I had on the board earlier from last Sunday, Saladin was the first person under the Dome of the Rocks being constructed. He was the first person to allow Muslims and non-Muslims to come there together to to have their, their time to pray to whoever they want to Muhammad or to their God Moses, or if you were a Christian, whatever. They didn't care. He had all three people going there, which is why people believe in the Muslim belief system that he's going to be their returning, deliverer. And so, anyway, yes.
Todd said the Dome of the Rock was constructed inside of a destroyed temple.
It was constructed on the site of the destroyed temple mount. The temple was destroyed in AD 70 by Titus, and so years later, on the same mount where the temple lied, the temple mount, the high lifted up place where the sacrifice would take place, the high priest would do all their priestly functions. That's where the temple mount was. And the Dome of the Rock was on the peak, which was Mount Moriah, which is where Abram sacrificed Isaac, what they say Ishmael, where they say Muhammad ascended from. That's where the Dome of the Rock was built in 691, way after the temple was destroyed. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Vicky said, I find it amazing the Dome of the Rock was allowed to be built. Was that because the Muslims were in control of Jerusalem at the time?
That's correct. And there was a short time in the 6-Day War where Jews had rulership over the Dome of the Rock. They owned it. They owned the rights to it. But they had it. That 6-Day War, they pummeled the Muslim people around them, and they owned it. And so therefore they had a chance to say, this is all about us. And they didn't want to have a war on their hands, so they relinquished that site back to the Muslims. Odd, isn't it? They just beat them in a war, and they gave back their holy site to them to have their place of prominence, which is kind of odd. So anyway, that being said, go to the chart again. So I want to go to the chart again. So you look at the pale horse. So go to the book of Revelation again. Go to the book of Revelation. I'm going to, let me stick it here. Hello. Where's the other page?
Jim just joined us.
Hey, Jim. Am I doing this again? I did it again. I lost the page. There it is. I keep losing pages, man. All right. So if you go to Revelation and see about the Revelation and the future horsemen, not of the apocalypse, but the horsemen of the revelation of the tribulation period. So in Revelation in chapter 4, or chapter 4, excuse me. On chapter 5, we have these the reference of the Lamb opening up the scroll, and in chapter 6, verse 8, is the pale horse. And I want to make sure we're reminding on the chart. Nancy brought up a good point to me. It looks like I'm saying that wave 2 of the rapture happens in Kislev. No, I don't mean that. I mean after these events happen, that this happens right before this, and then this happens right before this. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry about that if it makes it look confusing. So the event of the second wave happens not in Kislev, but right before this. But I couldn't fit it in this column, so I wanted to make sure I showed it that way. So I had to kind of pull it back. My apology, so it looks confusing. So the wave 2 happens right before Idar, the midpoint. The wave 3 happens right before mid-May, which is where you get your 3 months from. I mentioned it'd be 3 days to 3 months in between the second and third wave. All right? So the pale horse, if you read about the pale horse in Revelation chapter 6, verse 8, he says, and I saw and behold a pale horse, and one was sitting on him whose name was Death, and Hades followed after him, and there was given to him authority over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with death and by the wild beast of the earth. And when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar of those persons who had been killed because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they held. And a loud voice saying, How long, O sovereign Lord, the Holy One and true, dost thou not judge and take vengeance for our blood from those who dwell on the earth? So if you look back on your chart I put on here, in mid-May, that 3 months after the midpoint of tribulation, the pale horse appears as the opponent. He's the opponent, as mentioned, if you go back to how that name, yes?
Vicky said, I was wondering why wave 3 wasn't higher up in the column after the black horse.
Wave 3 happens. I was wanting to make sure you knew that it happened it happened somewhere between that event in mid-May, somewhere in there, no later than mid-May. That's all I was trying to communicate, but I confused you. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry about that. So when you go into 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, he mentions these names as I point out, from the horsemen, from the white to the red to the black to the pale. I point out to you the differences in what his name is revealed as. So the horsemen of the apocalypse, as people are calling them, and many movies and TV shows are based on this, they're actually the horsemen of the tribulation period, because the apocalypse is the revealing of Jesus Christ, which does not happen until after tribulation. So for people to misunderstand that is, to me, hilarious. The foremen of the tribulation, they usher in the satanic rule on the earth, which has nothing to do with revealing Jesus. Just the opposite. It's the false Jesus, the false Messiah. So that's why I don't call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That's a misnomer. What they mean by that is, well, why do people call them that? Because they're in the book of the Revelation, which means the apocalypse. So they see horsemen and the book of Revelation, which is the book of the apocalypse. They go, oh, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. No, the revealing of Jesus has events that lead up to it. And therefore, that's why it's in that book, but it's not leading to that specific event. It's leading to the event of tribulation. Does that make sense? So that's what's going on there. All right, so in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, he says, but we entreat you, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our assembling to him, that you be not quickly agitated in mind, nor alarmed, nor by spirit, nor by discourse, nor a letter, as from us, as though the day of the Lord was present. And we saw this already before, but I want to read it again. In verse 3, let no one delude you by any means, because the apostasy must come first, which is the, again, ordinal and cardinal numbers. So protos is the word for first there, and it means that's number 2 event. So it's almost like, so in other words, if I say I came in first place, I mean number 1. That'd be using the ordinal number. If I'm using the cardinal number, I'm using the 1, 2, 3 order. I'm counting 0 as a number, because between 0 and 1, there's 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. There's numbers there. there's some counting there. So you have to make sure. If you say I'm 1, if I'm 1 in line, then you have to reference that there's a point something point, all the way to 0. So 0 is a number when you're using cardinal numbers. When you're using ordinal numbers, first means 1. If you're using cardinal numbers, first means 2, because 0 is 1, if that makes sense. So here when he says the apostasy comes first, he's referring to the fact that the protos event this means the EMEA event is the rapture, wave 1 of the faithful ones that already came. And therefore everybody left behind gets all upset and angry. Everybody told me I'm going to be taken. What's going on? And they start falling away, which makes sense, right? So if you were told that before the Antichrist comes, you'll be gone, and all of a sudden you're going, hey, that's him, and yet I'm still here. What's up? And you get all kind of mad. And so you'll be like, you don't trust the preacher, you don't trust the Bible, and you begin to fall away. That's what apostasy means. You fall away. Why wouldn't you? I get it. You'd be like all kind of upset. And that's why he says in verse 3 of 2 Thessalonians 2, there must come first, and there must be revealed the man of sin. That's why on your on your chart, he's the man of sin on the white horse, which he comes as the one world ruler to solve all these problems of the chaos in the world and all this stuff. He introduces the world government, all that jazz, the one world religion, all that malarkey. Then that son of destruction, that's what he is on the red horse. It's on your chart right there. Then he's the opponent, as we see, and the pale horse. But why do I have the lawless one as the black one? The same reason why God does this a lot. He'll use he'll use things out of order to emphasize the one. So he emphasizes the lawless one in the next page of your dialogue. You turn the page, and he's right there in verse 7. It says, the secret of the lawless one is ready to working till the one restraining for the present shall be out of the way. So why would he focus on the lawless one? Because that's when the Antichrist is revealed as the beast, as the black horse. So that's why that one's out of order. It's why it doesn't flow in the order. It should be the opponent is the black horse, and then the pale horse should be the lawless one. No, because the lawless one is the one that reveals for the first time the Antichrist is not who you think he is. He's not the nice guy. He's not the law and order guy you thought he was in obeying the law of Moses. Oh, no. He was lying and deceiving you the whole time. He is anomia, which is nomia meaning law and awe meaning no law, which is the same word we use for transgression in the Bible, which is why a person who transgresses is a person who knows the law of God, meaning Old or New Testament alike, and says no to it, and therefore you're rebelling. So you first have to know the law in order to rebel from the law, and therefore you're a transgressor, which is why he's called the lawless one, because he's the one above all of God's creation that knows God's law. And he is going against God's law. He is the transgressor of transgressors. He is the lawless one of all lawless ones. He is the author of sin, as God says in John 8. He was the murderer from the beginning, he says. And he tells that through Cain. So there's a reason why he's called that. So again, he shows his lawlessness as the black horse. Then he transitions into the pale horse as give all glory and might unto me and worship the statues. He makes it talk and all this kind of malarkey stuff. So the reality is that the opponent in verse 4, as he says, going back to verse 4, the opponent who indeed lifts himself above everything called divinity or majesty, so as to seat himself in the temple of God, exhibiting himself that he is a God. See, that's why that one comes last. In between there is the lawless one. You can pretty much see that. So as you look on this chart here for this, I mentioned to you why also in mid-May, because remember in mid-May, going back to Numbers chapter 9, verse 10 and 11, there was a second Passover. Many people don't understand that. They go, what is that supposed to mean, a second Passover? Well, in the scripture, in Numbers chapter 9, verse 10 and 11, it said there was a Passover that's the normal one, right? And you do the normal Passover in the first month. Well, the second month was a Passover given of the year that was given to those who touched dead bodies. And so therefore, if you're actually in communion with a dead one of lawlessness of the Antichrist, who you didn't know was, you said he was your false Messiah. You thought he was the Messiah. You thought he's your false Messiah. You've been embracing communion with him. You've now been soiled with that dead man's bones, and that's why this is for you, this Passover, which leads to an exodus from death to life, which coincidentally is when their exodus happens when they cross over the Jordan River, and they go, whoa, and they run from Ammon through Moab to Edom. And you're wondering, how do I know that? Because that's in your Bible in Daniel in chapter 11, to remind you of that. In Daniel chapter 11, he says, in verse 41, speaking of the Antichrist, the beast, he will break in pieces and pass through and come to the land of splendor, that he may be weak. And many will be weak, but these will escape out of his hand, namely Edom, Moab, and Ammon, the children of Ammon. And there's the ones that he has no jurisdiction over, which coincidentally, when you crossed over the Jordan, what a coincidence. And that's where Petra is, down right here in Edom, which is where they're going to be sealed in. If you ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, remember that part where he goes in that red-looking like cavern, little needle-looking entryway? That's Petra in real life. And so God's going to make all the Jews go there, and he's going to just crumble the rocks in on the entrance, so you can't go in now. Remember how those caves, those like dwelling places, were inside the rock? Well, so you can't get in there. He seals it off and makes it so that Satan can't get in there, and that's how they're preserved. And right now they have a waterway. Right now they've been there for years with irrigation into that place. People always ask, how are they going to get water? It's already there, and it's not like it's like piping. It's like the natural water coming in, like from the river. So they just already had that coming in. So you really can't stop a natural water. I guess you could, but the reality is God's going to make it so that they won't have that happen to them. So they're going to be sustained.
Bibles in those caves. I put a New Testament there when I was there.
Did you really?
Yeah.
You put New Testament in one of the caves, really? That's crazy. that's pretty cool. Imagine one of those days you're going to see somebody in the next dispensation, and they're going to go, hey, and I saw your name, Nancy, on that Bible. Thanks.
I had my name on it, but anyway.
Oh, you didn't have your name on it? Oh, okay. Okay. You say compliments of Nancy Harbor. Good luck with the tribulation. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just saying, just kidding. All right, so is there a question online, babe?
Todd had asked Daniel, and Vicki said 1141, and Todd said I have it underlined.
Yep. And so when you look at that, by the way, let me go back to that just to show you another thing where I mentioned before how God emphasizes things. So in Daniel 11:31, notice how he does it. He says Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Edom, Moab, and he does it backwards. When you know they cross over the Jordan and go this way. You see how God doesn't always, God's not like us. He doesn't have to do things the way our rational mind thinks. He says, my ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. So you always think, well, why wouldn't he say Ammon first, and then Moab, and then Edom? That makes more sense. Well, I get it, I know, but he did it this way because the emphasis is on Petra. That's why he starts with Edom. I mean, come on. He does things his own way to put emphasis. He says things in opposite order. He says things out of order to put emphasis on something. He does this a lot. So if you think about how God thinks, it isn't how we think. So that's why, another reason why, going back to the earlier defense, the preface, you cannot know the exact day or the hour, because I just pointed out, for example, nuances, but I'm confessing, I don't know what it means exactly. I just know it's kind of interesting how this 63-year difference and this 7-year difference equals 70, and I kind of remember a 70th week of Daniel coming up ahead. Interesting to me. I don't know how it fits in. I just know it's interesting. I'm not going to sit there and conjecture what that means exactly, because I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to do that. That's God's thing. I don't set dates. Yes?
Todd said a little fast today.
Oh, I know. I'll calm down.
Tracy did a smile. Agree, Todd.
Okay, I'll stop it.
Moab and Ammon would have been 23rd from Adam. Yeah,
Moab,
the
oh, yeah.
generation of death, if you will, and they escaped death.
Well, I remember where Moab and Ammon came from was from the
Lot's grandson.
Lot's daughters sleeping with him.
Yeah, I
Incest.
know, but that's Lot's grandsons.
Yeah, that's true.
Lot
Yeah.
was 21 because he was Abraham's nephew, and Abraham was 20, so
Yep.
Lot is generation 21, and his grandsons are
And
generation 20.
I love Moab and Ammon and Rahab and Ruth. They're all people that come from like bad lives. You know what I mean? Like where it's drug use or prostitution or bad ill repute lifestyle. People go, God can never use me. Yeah, I can, dude. He used 2 incest people. So, really? Yeah, I did all kind. I worked some bad stuff. Yeah, so did Ruth. What you got? Yeah, but I was a harlot. Yeah, so was Rahab. What else you got? Those were all from the line of Jesus. So what you got? I mean, God's just proving to you. Don't look down on yourself like that. Don't worry. I came from a broken home. So lots of people in the Bible that God used that were worthless to man, but God goes, that's the whole point. I don't want you to think about yourself as being worthy of me using you. That's nothing to do with that. It has to do with me being worthy of choosing whoever I wish.
And all the fathers that came before. I mean,
Yeah.
for the parents or the grandparents, you don't know what the greats and the greats did long before
No,
them.
Abraham himself, the father of the Hebrew people, is an idol worshiper. He was an idolater, for crying out loud. He worshiped false gods. He was like throwing incense to golden images. Made of stone and stuff. This dude, seriously. I mean, Father Abraham, really? But anyway, he turned from all that. God did all that for him. But it just goes to show none of us have a good origin. So I wouldn't beat yourself up over your past. Learn from it and move on. So back to this chart here in the first column, the first box. So after the pale horse, the opponent declares himself as God, demands worship or be beheaded. The angels blow 3 more trumpets and 2 more woes to unleash the wrath of God as the beheaded cry from under the altar. So again, I don't have that one printed out, but remember the charts on the board I told you to reference. One of those charts is the 4 horsemen of tribulation. And on that chart, I go through the order when the trumpets are blown and when the bowls are poured out. And people go, well, because if you watch movies or you read books, they'll make it sound like the horsemen come right here, and then the trumpets blow, and then the bowls happen. They're all like, they categorize it like this, like that. And that's not what's happening. Because remember, it all starts with the misunderstanding of the scroll. Remember, the seal of the 7 scrolls? When Jesus opens the Mia, or 1 seal, what he's doing is, if you were to pardon my crude drawing of a scroll, okay? So that's a scroll, right? But there's a seal on it. That's a seal. So inside of this scroll here, this is the scroll. Inside are 7 scrolls. So he actually breaks the seal, this big scroll, pow, and all of a sudden 7 scrolls are inside, and he takes them out and reads each one of those separately. You're like, yeah. That's why they said, who's worthy to open the scroll? Yeah, because you can't touch that, dude. Even in a Jewish synagogue today, the rabbi has to call you up there to read the scroll, because only he's supposed to hold it and stuff like that. So they read it. So the scroll is this big scroll, and Jesus says he's the one that pops the seal, and then there's 7 scrolls inside. They actually think Jesus is going, pop 1, here's 2, here's 3. That's not what happens. He's taking one big scroll and going, pow. So if you read that in Revelation, Go to Revelation. I'll show you this in Revelation. And Revelation, that's what I was going to before in chapter 5 of Revelation. Chapter 5 of Revelation, he says, and I saw on the right of him, sitting on the throne, a scroll having been written within and outside. See, there's your inference to what I'm saying to you. No one wants to talk about this, but it says it right there. Written on a scroll having been written, this is Revelation 5, verse 1, written within and outside, firmly sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel publishing with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and to break its seals. Plural. See, singular, scroll, seals, plural. Because what I'm saying to you is true. And he says, and no one was able in the heavens, nor on the earth, nor under the earth, to open the scroll, nor see it. And I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll, nor to see it. Singular, scroll. And one of the elders says to me, do not weep. Behold, that lion has overcome, which is of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. He is also opening the scroll, singular, and the 7 seals of it, plural. So I just want you to know that you read on further, and he says, I saw in the midst of the throne and the 4 living ones, and in the midst of the elders, and a little lamb standing as if killed, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, in which are 7 spirits of God sent forth into the earth. And he came and took the scroll from the right hand of the one sitting on the throne, from God the Father. And when he took the scroll, the 4 living ones and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having each a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And it says, and they sung a new song, saying, thou art worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. Because, see, plural again, singular scroll, plural seals. Because thou wast killed and thou didst redeem. It says us in the actual English, but it's in brackets. It's not supposed to be there. To redeem to God with the blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation. And thou didst make them make to our God a royal priesthood, a royalty and a priesthood, and they shall reign on the earth. He's speaking to, again, humans on the earth, not the angelic host. And I saw and I heard a voice of many angels in the circle of the throne and the living ones and the elders. And the numbers of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands. Because myriads are thousands of thousands as it is. So he's saying there's tens of thousands, basically. There's a lot. And they say with a loud voice, worthy is that Lamb which was killed to receive the power and the wealth and the wisdom and the strength and the honor and the glory and the blessing. And every created thing which is in the heaven and on the earth and under the earth and on the sea and all the things in them. And I heard saying to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb, and be blessing and the honor and the glory and the might for the ages of the ages. And the 4 living ones said, Amen. And the elders fell down and did homage. That's a big introduction. It's like a regal introduction to Jesus. It's like make way for King Jesus, and they're like just. It's amazing. They're like going, oh my, yeah, oh yeah. That's what the image is like. They're all like going, whoa! He's actually moving from the priesthood piece to the king thing, to the judge thing. Whoa! He's moving. So, action's happening. Action's in the bullpen. He's coming out. Here comes the closer. That's what's going on right now. Using a baseball analogy, he's the guy. He's going to close the deal. Yes?
Pam said 8 seals total.
Yes, that's correct. Because there's 1 seal outside, and there's inside 7, so there's 8. That's correct. So when you look at this, when he goes into verse 1 of chapter 6, that's why he says, and I saw when the Lamb opened 1. See, this third 1 is Ina. Okay, so that's 1 specific seal. And I heard one of the 4 living ones saying, as with a voice of thunder, come. In verse 2 of chapter 6, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he sat on him, having a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering that he might conquer. And when he opened the second seal, and there's the seal there, and he says the seal, the second, it's Deuteron. So when you see the Deuteron in verse 3, left side of your margin in the diaglot, that's the word for number 3 seal. And when he says one of the 7 seals in verse 1, that's 1 specific seal, but based on the knowledge that he says the Deuteron he is missing the proto seal is not mentioned. And there came out another one. So on your chart, which I don't have on me, I told you the proto seal is reserved for the judgment unto Satan himself. That's reserved later. That's why he put it to the side. The proto seal is not mentioned. He opens the Mia seal, which is the number 1 seal, and then the 7-inch side. He takes the first one and puts it to the side to deal with Satan later, because he's going to deal with him specifically later, as we know in chapter 20 and later on in chapter 21. So, with that being said, that's where you see the seals being opened and understanding that, and you want to know about the trumpets and the seals and so forth, you can see because of that misnomer of understanding of how they are framed off by churchianity and prophetic peoples, they don't see the accordion type of unfolding. God's unfolding the progressive revealing of who Satan is. That's what he's doing. And he's using the trumpets and bowls to do it as Satan reveals one more of himself as being first he's the debonair. He's smooth talking. He's an attractive guy. He's a winner of people. Dude, that guy's cool, man. He's cool. He's stately. He's everything you want. He's gregarious. He's enthusiastic. He's smart. He's intelligent. He brings peace to every religious people, ethnic people. Everybody loves him. Black, white, brown. Forgot to write it down. Yeah, everybody likes him. People of different ethnicity, Muslim, Jew, Catholic, Islamic, Hindu, whatever. They all love this dude. He's just so loving. Okay. And then he's just so understanding. He's just so great. You think that. Go ahead. That's why he's a bow with no arrows. He has these strong words and there's vibrato about him, but it's all empty and hollow. That's why it says no arrows, because he's got no gumption behind it. It's all a hollow house of cards. But no one even believes that. It's like Politics 101. He's the greatest politician to ever walk the face of the planet. And you think they believed in politicians in the past and present that aren't guilty of sin when we know they are? He does that beyond the pale. And no one really sees him as being bad. He's a great guy. He's great. And he solves all these world problems and the economy and everything. And they're going, he's a genius. Genius. And they agree on the one world government. The UN gives all the power over to him to make peace. And he makes peace between the Jews and Muslims. Anybody can pull that off. They're going, wait. You guys aren't mad at each other? No, we're good. You don't want to kill Muslims? No. You don't want to kill Jews? No, we're good. Okay, how'd you do that? And he's like, I got the skills. And they're like, well, if you got those kind of skills, no one's pulled that off in a millennia. So once you go ahead, you just take the whole world and you make peace with all of us. If you can make peace with those two people, you can do anything. And that's why he gets the whole reins given to him, and that's the white horse. Then he continues to reveal himself with the red horse and so on. Yes?
Tracy said, makes me think of Justin Trudeau. Pam said true. Tracy said a guy just like him. Smooth operator, but not really.
But then you look at the red horse, and what does he do next? He starts pointing out like hate speech. The Bible's hate speech. It's exclusive. It's narrow-minded. It's bigotry. Jesus was, in actuality, he said some bigoted things, if you want to be technical about it, because he said in Matthew 10, go not to the Gentiles and the Samaritans. Ignore those people. Go to the Jews only. Jesus, that sounds kind of bigoted. You're saying you don't care about us if we're not brown-skinned and Jewish? Yeah, problem. No, I'm good. I'm just wondering why you said that. It sounds like you're excluding me. I am. Thought you love me. Well, that's later, not right now. Okay, that's weird. But people came across Jesus' way, he loved on them. But he said clearly, I'm not here for you. I don't throw... And the lady who said to him, please bless me, she said, even dogs want the crumbs from the master's table. She knew her place was secondary to the Jews. She had no problem with being second class or being discriminated against, because she knew that as long as God's the one doing discriminating, she's cool with that. She doesn't like when people do it. So when God does it, there's a reason behind why he does that. He's favoring the Jews over other people. That's where mankind gets the mentality of being arrogant and wrong when they want to domineer over another person because of their skin color or because of whatever else. That's just ignorant. We have no right to do that. God does, but we don't. God can favor Mary all day long, and another woman goes, why didn't you choose me? Because he's God. Every choice he makes is perfect, so I wouldn't be doing that if I was you. Or Egyptians can't say, hey, my firstborn is dead. You hated us. Yeah, kind of. That's about right. Well, that's not fair. And you are just zip it. You can't say nothing. So God can do that because he has power to create life and death. Man can't do that. So when you create life and you can take life, then you have the right to treat people as you wish. Until you can create life and take life from the soul itself, then come on. You can't do that. You can't make a soul. Therefore, you can't judge a soul. It's not your choice, not your life to do that.
The vessels say to the potter, what makest thou?
Right. You can't do that.
And I think, as far as Satan being revealed, think of the revelation at the end of the millennium. The bad at the end of the tribulation fit in the valley of Jehoshaphat. I don't think the ones that numbers the sand of the sea could fit there. I think there's going to be more than that. And you think about all the countless animals that will be slaughtered in the Aaronic priesthood in the millennium. All the prayers offered up for the saints. All the working out of the double, aiming for the double portion. All the good works that are going to be done.
On heaven and earth.
The seeing of the people suffering consequences in Gehenna, and yet he comes along and just in almost a nanosecond, that leaven, the sand of the sea, and the fire comes down. Too many of them to fit in Jehoshaphat, I believe.
Well, that's those people who get burned there, those are the ones who go with him also in the lake of the fire. So the Gog and Magog, those people there, I should have forgot that group of people. So those take the mark of the beast and worship him, and those who come against the camp of the saints at the end of the millennial reign are going to be cast in with him to the lake of fire. That's why it says in Matthew 25, to remind you, I'll get to Willie's question. In Matthew 25, we saw this before, but he says in Matthew 25 about the sheep and goat judgment, which is at the end of the millennial reign, not the beginning, at the judgment seat. That's not judgment. That's a different thing. This is a different judgment. But he says in Matthew 25, in verse 40 and 41, and he says, and the king answered, in Matthew 25, 40 and 41, he said, indeed I'll say to you that since you have done it to the least of the brethren, done it to me, which is people using that reference all day long, do unto your brother, or the golden rule. They get that from this kind of context of how you treat those who are thirsty and hungry is how you treat Christ. That's referring to specifically Israel during the 1,000-year reign. How will you treat them? That's where the darnel is and the tear is treated so harshly because of their ill treatment of Israel, as well as everybody else. So the sheep and goat judgment has to do with at the end of 1,000 years. How did you interact, those on the earth? How did you interact with Israel? So in verse 41, he then ends it by saying, how you've done it unto me, how you treated Israel, basically, to my brethren. He says, he will then also say to those at his left, which is the goats, depart from me, you cursed ones, into that Aeonian fire, which is prepared for the adversary and his messengers. And the angelos of him can be either demonic or human, because we can all be messengers of him if we're used by him. So the lake of fire was preserved for those who he has gathered, he gained worship from, basically. That's his angelos, that's his messengers. Anybody who worships him as their God, that's his messengers. And that's why the lake of fire is preserved for them. So that's where they go at the millennial reign when the fire consumes them. So you go into Revelation 20, to your point about the fire consuming the camp of the saints. And Revelation 20, he then would go forward and say, in verse 9, well, in verse 8, verse 7, just for context, verse 7 through 10, he says, and when 1,000 years may be completed, Revelation 20, verse 7, the adversary will be loosed out of his prison. And that word is Satanas. And he will go forth to deceive those ethnos. This says nations, it means ethnos. It means every ethnic type of persons. I don't care if you're white, black, brown, orange, yellow, doesn't matter. If you're an ethnicity, then you're included. That means every ethnicity is represented in goodness, but also in badness. We all have our goods and bads in us. So don't lie to me and say all this ethnicity is good and all this ethnicity is bad. That's a lie. All ethnicities have good and bad apples in each ethnicity. All of us do. Join the club. It's called being human. So he says, but that's why God's going to make of the bad people everyone represented in there as well as on the good side. So he says in this case, on the bad side, he will go forth and deceive all those ethnos people, which is everybody on the earth, all the ethnicities, it's why he even says it was in the four corners of the earth, emphasizing where the whole planet, Gog and Magog, so as to assemble them for war, which is battle number 3 of Gog and Magog, whose number is as the sand of the sea, and they went up on the breadth of the earth and circled the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down out of heaven from God and consumed them. And it says, and that enemy, or Diabolos, who deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire and sulfur, where both the beast and the false prophet are cast, and they were tormented day and night for the ages of ages. So you see on here where there's no real connection here per se that they go to the lake of fire with him. But if you go back to Revelation in chapter 13, he says here in Revelation chapter 13, I'm going back and forth on some scriptures here. So Revelation 13, he says, is it 13? Yeah, and well, there's the mark of the beast. That's not the right one I wanted to go to. It's chapter 14, excuse me. Chapter 14, verses 9 through 11. And another third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worship the beast and his image, and receive a mark on his forehead or in his hand, even he shall drink of that wine of the wrath of God. Now, remember, it's what you believe or what you do. Your forehead represents what you believe, and your hand represents what you do. It doesn't matter if you say, I'm doing this, but I don't believe. It doesn't matter. If you took the mark for reasons of practicality, or you justified it by saying, I didn't really believe that he was it doesn't matter if you worshiped him because it was a need to keep your family safe. It's still wrong. Don't justify the means. The end does not justify the means. The means that you took to take on a mark and then to worship him, you can't say, I worship him, Lord, only because I keep my wife and kids safe. It's wrong. So it's wrong, whether you did it for practical reasons or because you really believed in it, which is why it says hand or forehead. Represents, for practicality reasons, what you do, your hand, or what you believe in your forehead, your mind. So because the battlefield is the mind. 2 Corinthians 10 talks about that. Take every thought captive. Don't justify what you do because of the end game. In verse 10, he says, even he shall drink of that wine of the wrath of God, those who take the mark of the beast and worship him, it says, right? And which is mingled, diluted with the cup of indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and sulfur and the presence, which means in the face of, in the general sense, of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Yee, sad. And, verse 11, the smoke of their torment rises up for the ages of the ages. And they have no rest, day and night, who worship the beast and his image, and if anyone received the mark of his name. So because of that context, you would think that in Revelation 20, when they come across the camp of the saints, they do that because they worship him as being the one God who can overcome the God of the millennial reign, which is Christ himself, which is really insane. How ignorant is that? You just saw him reign for 1,000 years, and you actually think this Yahoo, who he chained up for 1,000 years, is now more powerful than one who put him there? You're pretty ignorant to think that. It shows you how bent you are on disliking and being displeased with the Lord and his will in your life. Yes?
Todd said in verse 8 of Revelation 20, who is numbered as the sand of the sea.
Those are the people that are following him. There's a multitude of people that come after him that are believing, again, who are worshiping him as the one who can usurp Christ as king. So that represents those who are worshiping the enemy as saying, we can actually take him. So first of all, it's a group of two different people. It's a group on the earth who's alive, but it's also those people that remember that earlier when he had the people, back to Ezekiel, if you go to Ezekiel, sorry, it's falling apart too. If you go to Ezekiel in chapter 40, I believe it's 40. Let me go back and find it here for you. The Hemengog. 39. So in Ezekiel 39, the sand of the sea people in Revelation 28 represents those who are alive who come against Jesus to take and worship the false god as Satan. And they come against the king and God who this Saul worship on, who ruled the world. They want to take Satan's side. He can usurp him. And represents people from Gog and Magog, battle number 2, that were not dealt with yet. They were judged and killed and then buried in Hemengog, but they haven't been dealt with yet from their finality, so they're raised up again. So they die twice. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's pretty crazy. Well, remember, the lake of fire is the second death. That's what it's called, just saying. So, and you look in Ezekiel 39 and verse 11 to 16, he says, and on that day I will give Gog a noted place and a burying place in Israel, the graveyard of strangers by the seashore, and the slope of the, that's why it says seashore, see, sands of the sea. So he says, and the slope of the valley will be enclosed with a wall, and there Gog and all the multitude shall be buried, and it shall be called the graveyard of Gog, for the house of Israel will bury them in the land that will be cleansed. This is going on during the 75 days where the Lord is pummeling people in Jehoshaphat. He already takes the Gog and Magog battle too, kills people. Then he tells Israel to take these people out of the land and bury them in Hemengog. Take them out. So they're doing that while he's by himself doing this like massive slaughter. It's like so sad. It's the great winepress of God, as he called it, the grapes of wrath. So he says for the house, what's that?
Is that a battle going on there, and then also Israel's having a battle simultaneously?
So your point, Willie, was, is there 2 battles going on? No. So Jesus comes back. So here's what happened. Jesus comes back on a white horse. And with a sword, with a broadsword, it says. And that's Revelation in 19. All right? So when he comes back, by the way, see a coincidence? White horse? The first time you see Jesus for real is a white horse. How's the Antichrist come the first time he reveals himself? A white horse. You sly dog. The same way Jesus is called the bright morning star, Satan's called the morning star. Really? So Jesus is the white horse with bow and arrows. He's got a bow, no arrows, meaning he's got no authority to do just anything. Jesus has it all. So I'm just saying. Yes?
Vicky said, smoke of the ages is for 1,000 years, right? Pam said, I think it's ongoing for as long as the Lord requires. Vicky said, it's not the ages of the ages, though.
Ages of ages is a term in Koine Greek to reference perpetuity, because in Hebrew they can say eternally and it means eternally, or perpetuity, perpetual nature. In the Koine Greek you have to say ages of ages to mean that same thing. So it means in perpetuity until God determines he's satisfied or his will is being completed or whatever that is. But as far as we know, it's indefinite. It's not limited to 1,000 years or 2,000 years. It's indefinite. Ages of ages means indefinite. Indefinite. So on the white horse, so Jesus comes back to your point, Willie. There's Gog and Magog. Battle 1 already happened. This already happened at the midpoint. It already happened. And Israel lost. That's why they run to Petra. They lost. They're gone. They lose that battle. And that's how he sets up his image in the temple. That's how he's saying, got this. This is mine now. They're like, well, that ain't cool. Well, it was their temple, and now he's going, it's mine now. They're like, well, I guess I'm out. So 144,000 make it alive, but the rest of them are slaughtered. It's not good. And those who aren't slaughtered in that Exodus, he seeks them out and kills them. It's not good. So that's the midpoint. Then the end of tribulation happens, like you just mentioned. This is the end of trib right here. Jesus comes back. So then he comes back, and he goes back to the Mount of Olives. So as the Mount of Olives splits in two and forms Jehoshaphat, he also instantaneously, so Gog and Magog, because he's Jesus, right? I mean, he doesn't have to be like, he can be multi-talented here because he's God. Do things at once. So over here, he just destroys these people. He just goes, whew, whether he says it by a hand gesture or by whatever, they just fall lifeless. They just go, funk, they just fall lifeless. And he goes, clean that up for me. Yes, sir. So that's pretty awe-inspiring. It's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me right now? So people that you see in Jerusalem, in the Temple Mount, defiling the temple, defiling God's vessels, mocking God, worshiping Satan, he just goes, and they just go lifeless. They're like, shut up. And he goes, yeah, clean that up. Take him out. Get rid of them. I don't want them in my land. Get them out. They're disgusting. Get them out. Oh, okay. Got it, Lord. What are you going to do? I got stuff to take care of. He goes to the Mount of Olives, splits in two, forms Jehoshaphat, and that's where he cast. He just asked all the, how do you want to say? All those not of covenant.
For all ages.
Yep, from Revelation 14, from all covenant past to present. And he does that for 75 days. He's doing this. For a 75-day period, he just pulverizes them. He's just sad. It's really, really sad. And he goes, and that's in Revelation 14, where he takes the sickle into the earth, and he digs them all up, and then they come back, and he rejoins their soul, their body, so they can experience two things. One, they all take a knee. They all take a knee, and they say, "You are the Lord who is worthy to be all this," right? And then he goes, I told you would say it eventually, but now it's too late. You're going to die. And then they all kneel, and they say that. Because in Philippians says, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. They're part of the every. And there's no coincidence why he says, on the earth or under the earth. Yeah, because they're taken out from the dead. Their souls back with their body reunited. And God says, now bow and proclaim me as Lord. Yes, sir. So they do that, and then he just kills them with a big sword. He just, for 75 days, he goes through this galloping rant of just like, it's the blood is so much. You know how big a horse is? You've seen a horse. It's big. They're like, horses' bridles go to right here, right? About this high, 4.5 feet off the ground, roughly. That's how high the blood is. That's a lot of blood, man. That's a lot. When the valley's a mile wide, it's a lot. It's about 2 billion people he is going to slaughter in 75 days. He's going to keep on. If you want, that's in Revelation 14. So to prove your point, your question was, is he doing two things at once? Kind of. When he comes back, he just simply destroys them. He doesn't really focus on. He just destroys instantly these people. These people just die. Then you have the Ezekiel. Well,
It's
you have.
interesting. A billion seconds is 32 years. So 2 billion seconds, 64 years, or towards 75, let's say. It's almost like each person who dies gets a second from the Lord. An individual.
Say that. What did you just say? Say that again.
A billion seconds is about 32 years. So 2 billion seconds.
How do you know that? Wait, stop. How do you know that? A billion seconds is.
Because I can do math, I knew
She's a
that.
professor in math. Okay, so a billion seconds is how many? A billion seconds is what?
A billion seconds is approximately 32 years. So 2 billion seconds is about 64 years. Or maybe, maybe there's more than 2 billion. We're heading for 75. It's almost like each person who dies gets a second of attention from the Lord for their death. He recognizes each individually that dies.
Did y'all hear that online what Nancy just said, being a professor in math in her college days? Have you heard that? Did they hear that?
He said no.
Okay, well, you got to say that again. You got to say it again.
Okay.
Do it.
I know from my days working with math, all the interesting facts you find out, and you can and I can verify it. A billion seconds is about 32 years. So 2 billion seconds is about 64 years. Then that would, you're heading for 75 years. However, 2 billion plus people destroyed in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It's like almost each one of those people destroyed gets a second of attention from the Lord. I know you, boom.
Boom. Wow. So that's kind of crazy.
Maybe that's why it's 75 days, because each one gets a second of attention.
Wow. That's wow.
It almost looks that way.
Y'all heard it now, right? Yes.
Tracy said, I can't hear well. How many did she say?
She said there's okay. You said for every billion.
1 billion seconds is approximately 32 years.
1 billion seconds is 32 years.
Roughly. 31.97
Roughly.
anyway.
And then so 2 billion is 64.
64 years. And
Okay.
let's say more than 2 billion got slaughtered in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It's almost each one gets a second of individual recognition from the Lord before he slaughters them. It's almost like the Lord looks at each one for a second before they're slaughtered.
Then you got to convert years to days.
Well, no, I've done
Well,
that. It's done already.
Yeah, she's just saying, she's interpolating that, yeah. So
No, 2 billion is 64 seconds. More than 2 billion people slaughtered in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It's like almost each one gets a second of attention from the Lord. I see you individually.
so Nancy's basically saying that because there's a 1 billion seconds equals 32 years, and these 32 years divided that by the 2 billion people means they all get a second of the Lord before he slaughters them. That's what she's saying. The irony of how the billions of seconds, 1 billion seconds equals 32 years, he's interpolating that into the 2 billion plus people would then, over a 75-day period, doing the math of that, would get 1 second of recognition from God before he just slaughters them and says, you're done. As if he just has 1 second stare. Yeah, I know you, and you're no more. Wow, that's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's just like, I never thought of that. That's insane.
It could be 75 years, but 75 days. A day with the Lord is the
1,000 years. 1,000 years is a day.
It's like in some ways they get some kind of nanosecond of recognition before they're gone.
Yeah, but it's interesting how when we saw in the Crucifixion, when Jesus locked eyes with Judas and Peter, we saw what it did to them. It demoralized them, and they knew him. And it caused them great grief and strife of like, oh no, I let him down. I can only imagine people who don't know him will be just awestruck, I'm sure. They don't know. They have no recollection of letting him down. They didn't even know him. They didn't even believe.
The Lord could do that
So-
slaughter in less than 75 days, so why 75 days?
That's true, I know.
You
Why?
get the idea, there's some
Wow.
moment.
That's amazing. All right, so to answer Willie's question originally was, did Jesus have 2 battles at one time? Well, he does this instantly, and then they take the bodies to him and Gog, while he focuses physically on this part of it. That answers your question. So he's not physically in 2 different places. He's just, as he's coming down to the earth, he just, then he goes right to the Mount of Olives, splits in 2, and he's physically there, focused on that event. He's not caring about Gog and Magog anymore. That's a whole, he already took care of that. All the Jews are doing at that point is going, there's a lot of dead carcasses. He's like, I know. That's why he got over 2 months to take them out. It's a lot of time, by the way. Imagine how much work that is. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of people, by the way. If you're taking 2 months, basically 2.5 months to take dead carcasses out, I'd imagine it's a lot of dead people. That's a lot of dead bodies to be carrying out. I'd imagine there's be a lot. I'm just saying. That's a lot. So they're mostly Muslim people, obviously. Yes?
Tracy said, but God doesn't need time, right? It could happen in 1 second because in everyone's perception, he sees them all.
Oh, yeah.
And Vicky said if this is going on for 75 years, there would be less than 1 second before slaughter. And Tracy said, maybe I missed something. Did you say there was a time frame? Vicky said 75 days.
There's a 75-day time frame from which Jesus is doing the pummeling in Jehoshaphat. That's based on Daniel's 12 math. If you want to see that, I can show you that too. And so the reality is that the 75-day period, all we're doing is taking a 75-day period, adding 2 billion people in a 75-day period, recognizing that 1 billion seconds is 32 years, but extrapolating that divided by the 2 billion people, Nancy's saying based on her math, I don't claim to know all this, but based on a math professor, we're saying that interpolation of 2 billion people, knowing that 1 billion seconds equals 32 years, and you condense those 2 truths into a 75-day period, it equals that one person would potentially have 1 second of the Lord's glance before their life's taken. That's what we're saying. So we're not saying 75 years. No, we're just saying it's 75 days, and there's 2 billion people roughly, and because of that, interpolation of 1 billion seconds equaling 32 years, you add that into the people, they're basically going to get maybe 1 second a person from the Lord's glance. So as I'll read Ezekiel first.
It's almost like 75 years condensed into 75 days.
Yeah.
In a sense.
In a sense, because you're taking
they
the.
get some kind of nanosecond recognition from the Lord,
Yeah.
I think, each person.
That makes it's
Thou God seest me.
That's crazy. Yeah, yes.
Vicky meant 75 days, not 75 years. That was a mistype.
That's fine. So in Ezekiel chapter 39 and verse 11 again, verse 12, he says, "For the house of Israel will bury them, and for the land that land may be cleansed. During 7 months, the people," it says, the people of the land will be employed in burying them, and it shall be to them a memorable epic, the day when he was glorified, saith the Lord." So actually, it's not 75. They're doing this for more than just 2.5 months. It goes on in the first 5 months of the millennia, what they're doing. Then he says, "And then they will send men everywhere to traverse the land and bury them who are left on the face of the ground to purify it after the 7 months. And they will make diligent search, and everyone who traverses the land upon seeing a human bone shall set a mark near it till the buriers bury it at Gai, which is the graveyard of Gog, or the valley of Hemengog. For the name of that city should be called the graveyard, or Hemanoah. Thus should the land be cleansed." So it's interesting, again, how it's going to take place this will carry over into the millennial reign for the first 5 months. So you people all say, what are we doing in the millennia? Well, there's a lot of cleanup we're doing. Remember, God's restoring the earth at the beginning of the millennial reign. He's not creating a new earth, a new heaven. He's restoring earth. That's part of the restoration, cleanup. So restoration means cleanup. A lot of cleanup to do. Imagine the carnage he just did. This was crazy. And by the way, when that's done, the Mount Olives goes back together again. That valley's just gone. That's weird, man. I can't even imagine what that looks like. We're not going to even see that. I don't think so, anyway. Maybe from heaven you might see a heavenly view of it, maybe, because there is a crowd with them, it says. So we might be able to see it in Revelation 19. We're going to be there peripherally. So maybe we get a stadium sky seat view of this whole activity. But that's insane. I don't know if I want to see that. That's horrific. That's just like every worst horror show in your life being realized. That's just, I couldn't even imagine. The cries, the wailing, the massacre. It's just, oh my gosh, man. That's like, it takes Sherman's tank through Georgia looking like nothing. This is nothing compared to Stalin's slaughter or the Catholics' billions of slaughters they have done, or Hitler's slaughter. This goes beyond that, man. This is ridiculous. Yes?
Todd said, please explain Revelation 20, verse 9, the breadth of the earth and camp of the saints.
Revelation 20, verse 9. The breadth of the earth. Okay, they went up on the breadth of the earth and circled the camp of the saints. So you're asking me they went up on the breadth of the earth. Okay, so the word up is upon, on the left side of your margin, and they went up upon the breadth. The word there is there, the bratos there. So a pratos. So you have the breadth of the earth and encircled the camp of the saints. So the breadth of the earth speaks to the I really can't. I don't want to get in this ball right now. There's something here I don't want to talk about right now yet. It's too much to get involved in right now. But let's just say that it speaks to the restored earth, and it speaks to a restored earth and how it will be.
He said that's fine.
That's right. Okay, no, you're on a good point, by the way. It's interesting how God led you here. But so it's a good thing. So the breadth of the earth represents how they are on a. I'll put it this way. I'm not going to mislead, nor am I going to leave out. I don't want to mislead or misstate, but I do want to leave out something without getting involved in a huge other rabbit trail that I will address later, but not right.
You read all these verses earlier.
Yeah. So when he went up from the breadth of the earth,
you can stop.
it just means that they're going back up on. I'll put it to you this way, and this is a huge spoiler alert. The earth is different when he is talking about this state of affairs. So the earth you know now will not be the earth he's talking about in this context. By de facto, it's not. We know it's not. He restores it. The question is, what did he restore it to? What does it look like? And that's why it's referencing the breadth of the earth like it is in verse 9. So I'll get into that with you later. Not now. But there's a little spoiler there for you that it's dealing with that issue. That the earth we know now is not the earth that it was and the earth that it will be. It's just that simple. It's just simple. So what that means, that's another conversation. But I want to make sure you know that it doesn't mean what it was before and what it will be looks nothing like it is now. Because it can't. He restored it. He said so. And if you're thinking, oh, you mean the ring of water around the earth and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and there's a whole lot more too. Remember, there was not mountains before either, by the way. You're going, what? No, man. God birthed the mountains in the book of Psalms. He says so. So I want to show you this. So we're off a little rabbit trail, but I want to show you this. A little bit of stuff. So go to Psalm 90. A psalm of Moses, Psalm 90, verse 1 and 2. A prayer of Moshe, the man of God, Elohim, Adonai. Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth. That means birthed in the Hebrew language. That means they didn't exist before. Did Bianca exist before you birthed her out of your womb? No, I didn't think so. So you can't. Well, not on this earth she didn't. In God's eyes, I guess you could say she always existed, right? But for us, birth means brought forth. So that means the mountains didn't exist. They were brought forth. But when? Well, God tells you when, because he rose the mountains and sunk the valleys. So where do I can see that in chapter 104 of the book of Psalms. 104, verses 5 through 8. And he says, who laid the foundations of the earth, that it should not be removed forever? Thou coverest it with the abyss, as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. And he says, at the face, by the way, it says mountains, but that should say, that's the word he's using there. It's actually a bad translation. It should say, in contrast to the flat land, it was a mountain, but it was actually just a larger hill. Mountains that we think today is thousands of feet high in the air. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about a mountain as in what it should say is large hills. The water stood above the large hills. At thy rebuke they fled, and the voice of the thunder they hastened away. And thou, the reason he says mountains is because in verse 6, he's referring to in verse 8, thou go up by the mountains, and they go down by the valleys unto the place where you form them. What he's talking about is God rose the hills into mountains and sunk the valleys into the depths of the seas. And hence the water went, and that's why you have the Pacific and the Atlantic and all the rest of them. That's where it came from. So that's what he's talking about. So therefore, God changed how the earth was. You can't sit here and tell me you don't understand that, because it's clear. No meteorologist can ever tell you that all the clouds of the earth cannot hold all the water from a flood. If they were to assume or agree that God did do a worldwide flood, which he did, then therefore where'd the water go? Well, the clouds held it. Really? It's got to come back down again, so that's a repetitive ignorance. You have to somewhere besides the clouds do something with that water. So God said, I know, I got this. That's why he went, phew. And you're like, oh. And that's why the earth is now nothing like what it was, and nor will it be again. It's going to be the same way it was in the future as it was in the past. In the present, we don't know what it looks like, just so you know. It's not the real thing. This is the temporal place. Yes?
Todd said, who is referenced to the word they? Or what is referenced to the word they?
Oh, the waters. The waters. When he said the waters stood above the mountains in verse 6, they is the waters. They ascend by the mountains, they go down by the valleys. Because they went up above the landmass, the waters did, and now they go down to the valleys. They go where God tells them to. It's not the waters.
Okay?
The waters is the they. Good question. The they is the waters. All right? So, going back to this chart, I didn't get very far today. Gosh, I'm pretty sad. All right. So, Todd's probably going to figures.
And Trace said, is this before the Noah flood?
No. The verse chapter